Blood trickled down Colonel Amara Lewis's wrists as the police locked the cuffs tighter, mocking her every move. But instead of breaking, she raised her hands high and delivered a flawless military salute, stunning the crowd and forcing everyone to see who she truly was. How did a decorated black female commander end up humiliated on the street? And how could one salute turn the tables on the very officers who chained her? Hit the like button and share this story with others. Now let's uncover what really happened. I was standing in my pharmacy doorway when the cuffs clicked shut. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut through the afternoon like a razor. Colonel Amara Lewis didn't flinch. She stood there between Officer Briggs and Officer Keller, shoulders squared, chin level, a tall black woman in a plain blouse and jeans. The metalhead shooter skin, raw thin threads of red, ran down to her palms. Briggs noticed and smiled like it proved something. Keller looked away. Move along. Briggs barked at us. Nobody moved. Phones rose instead, a slow forest of glass and hands. Someone gasped. Someone else said, "Lord have mercy." I felt my own chest lock up. I've known Amara since we were kids on this block. I've watched her leave for the Marines, come home stronger, carry herself like a promise she intended to keep. And now this, on a cracked strip of sidewalk, I sweep every morning, 2 officers leaning on her with the kind of casual force you only use when you think nobody can stop you. "Don't resist," Keller muttered. He said it to her, but it sounded like he was saying it to himself. Amara didn't resist. She did something harder. She gathered herself, breath and shoulders back, and lifted her hands as far as the chain would let them rise. The cuffs bit deeper. She didn't blink. She set her heels, drew the shortest possible line from earth to sky, and gave a textbook military salute. Precise, clean, unmistakable. Everything on the street cracked and went quiet. A bus hissed to a stop across the way and then shut off. A kid on a bike put both feet down and just stared. An older man who had been arguing about lottery numbers under the awning took his cap off without thinking. I heard my own voice in my head counting the drill beats the way we used to do for fun when she'd visit home on leave. 1 and 2 and hold. Briggs laughed at first, one sharp bark that died in his throat when he realized nobody else joined him. A tiny muscle in his jaw jumped. Keller took 1 step back and then forward again like the sidewalk had shifted under his boots. Amara lowered the salute only when she chose to, not when anyone told her to. Her lips were almost still when she spoke, but I was close enough to hear. "Gentlemen," she said, "you just handcuffed the youngest black female colonel in Marine Corps history." It wasn't bragging. It wasn't even loud. It was a piece of information placed carefully on the table between them and the truth. The phones around us lifted higher. A woman whispered, "Oh my God," like she'd found the missing word for what she was feeling. Somewhere down the block, a siren yawned and then thought better of it. Briggs leaned in until his badge almost touched Amara's shoulder. "Out here, stripes don't mean much," he said. "Out here, we ask the questions." And out here, Amara answered, "The law still applies." Keller's eyes flicked to me. I held mine steady as I could and let him see the camera in my hand. He knew what a video can do in a city already wound tight. They both did. That's what made the moment crackle, the certainty on their faces, meeting the certainty on hers and getting no purchase. Behind me, my pharmacist's bell chimed. I didn't turn. The air had that heavy pre-storm feel, the kind that presses on your collarbone. I remember thinking how small details hang on when big things happen, the way Amara's right sleeve had ridden up. The scuff on Keller's left boot, a single bead of sweat sliding down Briggs's temple, collecting a tiny stripe of street dust on its way. "Back it up," Briggs told the crowd, sweeping his free hand to widen the circle. The circle didn't widen. It settled. 2 men I knew from church stepped forward just enough to make clear that we were still here. A teenager, Marcus, a kid who'd been inside my store 10 minutes earlier, had his phone up and steady, both elbows braced against his ribs like a cameraman. He never looked down. I felt anger shoot through me, the way heat does when you open an oven. But anger wouldn't help her. Witness would. So I made sure my voice worked before I used it. "Officer," I said to Keller, calm as a counterbell. "Her name is Colonel Amara Lewis." He swallowed. Briggs didn't. "Names don't change facts," Briggs said. "They do when you use the right ones," I said. Amara didn't need me to defend her. She didn't need anyone. That was the point and the problem. She stood on her own feet in her own neighborhood in front of people who had watched her grow up, and claim nothing more than what she had earned. You could feel the math of that settling over the block. What does it take to put steel on a woman like this? What does it take to take it off? A police SUV rolled up fast, nosing awkwardly into the curb, and the new engine's idle sounded like a held breath. I remember the stripe of late light across the windshield and the wobble of heat above the hood. I remember thinking this is where stories turn either toward the right thing or away from it. Amara's hands trembled once. Just once. She fixed them by lacing her fingers and letting the chain clink the way someone straightens a picture frame on a crooked wall. Then she looked past Briggs, past Keller, past all of us, at some point the rest of us couldn't see, and set her jaw in a way that told me she had already made a choice. Not to fight with fists, not to fold, to stand. People will tell you courage is loud. It isn't. Most days it's quiet, pared down to the words that matter and the breaths you can control. On that sidewalk, courage looked like a woman holding her ground without moving an inch. "How did we get here?" someone asked behind me, and it wasn't a question for the officers. It was for the city, for the history that hangs in the air like humidity. How do you lay hands on a daughter of this block on a colonel like she is? Nobody I could answer part of that. I could tell them what I knew. What I'd seen building all week, patrol cars running slow past the nicer sedans, officers lingering by the corner, with eyes that did too much counting. I could tell them about the way Amara had paused in my doorway that morning, eyes steady but a little tired, the way people look when they're carrying more than one kind of weight. But I didn't say any of that. There would be time. There would be paperwork and statements and meetings where men in ties said procedure like a magic word. Right then, the only record that mattered was the one we were making with our eyes and our phones and our refusal to blink. Briggs tugged on the chain. "Walk," he said. Amara didn't, not until she was ready. She lifted her chin another fraction, the smallest rise in a tide that had been coming in for a long time, and let out a breath you could almost hear. When she spoke, her voice carried just enough to reach the edge of the circle. "Let everyone see," she said. And they did. We did. The whole block watched as the line between power and authority tried to hold and then began slowly to fray. You want to know how a woman like that ended up in cuffs on a street that knows her name? You want to know how one salute could turn a crowd into a witness and two officers into a question they couldn't answer? It didn't start with the sirens or the cameras or even the cuffs. It started earlier in a quiet kitchen in an old house in Oakwood Heights on a morning that looked like any other until it wasn't. I stopped by the Lewis house just after sunrise, the hour when the street is soft and the city hasn't put its armor on yet. Amara was already up. With her, it was never an alarm clock. 20 years in the Marines kept time for her. I could hear a kettle click off and the faint scrape of a chair across the kitchen floor. The place still smelled like old wood and laundry soap the way it did when we were kids. "Doors open," she called, and I let myself in. Ruth was in the next room, propped on pillows, a wool blanket tucked neat at her hips. The cough that came from her was small but stubborn, like something that couldn't admit it was tired. I set my pharmacy bag on the dresser and checked the weekly pill organizer morning, row filled noon and evening, still empty. "How's the breathing?" I asked. "Like a rusty harmonica," she said, smiling with half her face. "Don't fuss. Sit." Amara came in with 2 mugs and a glass of water, moving the way she always moved, deliberate, nothing wasted. She still wore a t-shirt and soft pants, but you could see the Marine in the way her shoulders sat, in the way she listened first and spoke second. The sleeves hugged the kind of strength that doesn't need proving. A silver eagle pin, the colonel's bird, rested on the mantel beside a folded uniform blouse, ready for the day she'd put it back on. "BP looked good last night," Amara said to her mother, wrapping the cuff around Ruth's arm with a tenderness that didn't slow her hands. "We'll keep the salt down. Oatmeal this morning." Ruth reached for Amara's wrist, thin fingers closing over muscle. "Congai," she said in that mix of English and the home she carried in her voice. "You keep your head up. Always. Don't let anyone take your dignity." "I won't," Amara said. She didn't have to promise. The promise had been living in her posture for years. I sat on the edge of the chair and watched them do that quiet dance families do, the patient who hates being fussed over, and the daughter who can't help measuring each breath. On the wall were photos I'd seen 100 times, Ruth holding a toddler in a sundress, a school picture with crooked bangs and a mouth missing one front tooth, a graduation cap crooked over tight curls, Then the uniform shots desert dust on the boot's eyes forward. In one frame, Amar had her arm around me, and we were both 19, grinning like we knew something the world didn't. Maybe we did. She set oatmeal on the tray with a drizzle of honey and a handful of blueberries, then handed me a mug. "Try it," she said. I did. It tasted like mornings before the neighborhood learned to flinch. "Remember Mr. Halpern's store?" Ruth asked, blowing on a spoonful. "How he followed you too, up and down the aisles like you were planning a heist." "I remember you telling him we paid the same as anyone else," Amara said, "and that if he didn't like it, he could learn to do without our money." Ruth laughed, then coughed, then laughed again. "Your mouth was always braver than mine." Amara shook her head. "You taught me. We could all pretend the past was sepia and funny, but it wasn't. I remember the summer a cruiser idled so long outside this house, the engine made the windows hum. I remember a word spray-painted on the sidewalk that took 3 buckets of water to fade. I remember a night a man grabbed my collar, and Amara stepped in between us. Voice steady, hands, low, eyes high. She has been stepping between people in trouble since she was tall enough to take a step. On the kitchen counter lay a manila envelope stamped with travel orders and a new base name, Virginia, a prestigious command change of command in 2 weeks. If you've never seen a future sitting on paper, that's what it looks like. A date, a place, a job that says, "We trust you with something big." The uniform on the mantle wasn't ceremony, it was trajectory. "You nervous?" I asked. "About Mom or the job?" She said. "Both." She took a breath, measured like everything else. "The job is work. I know how to work. Mom is Mom, and I'm her kid." Ruth set her spoon down and looked at us, one then the other. "I am not going anywhere today," she said like a judge delivering a ruling. "So stop looking at me like I'll float off." We all laughed. The sound felt good. It felt like a field held together by a fence that might not be pretty, but doesn't break. I topped off Ruth's water and checked the inhaler spacer. "I'll bring the refill after lunch," I said. "Crowd's been thick at the pharmacy, but I'll cut through the line for you." "Don't you dare cut through on my account," Ruth said. "You'll start a riot. Oakwood Heights doesn't need me for that," I said, and then wished I hadn't because the truth of it pulled the temperature down a degree. Amara rinsed the mug and stood at the sink for a beat, the way people do when they're adding up a day before it starts. Outside, a bus side to a stop, brakes squealing, their usual complaint. The sun slid a pale stripe across the table. For a moment, the house was just a house. A widow's plant in the window, a list on the fridge, a calendar with doctor appointments circled in blue. Peace doesn't announce itself. It just is until it isn't. Malcolm, Amara said, still looking out the window, "You ever notice how the patrol cars drive slower on this block than the next one over?" "I notice," I said. She dried her hands and turned. "I'm taking Mom's prescription in today. I'll be back before noon. I'll be at the counter," I told her. "If you need anything." Ruth caught her daughter's sleeve as she passed and tugged her close. Their foreheads touched the way I'd seen 1,000 mothers and daughters do, but this one landed with a weight I can't explain. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the fact that even the clock seemed to hold its breath. "Listen to me," Ruth said, voice low and iron. "You are my child. You are your father's pride. You are a colonel of the United States Marine Corps. Keep your dignity. Don't let anyone take it from you." Amara nodded once. Not a soldier's salute, just a daughter's yes. I left a few minutes later with the empty pill sleeve in my pocket and a plan to label the new one before lunch. On the porch, I paused. The street looked ordinary, 2 kids arguing over a basketball, a mail truck yawning open, a woman tugging a stubborn dog. I could have stood there all morning and convinced myself that ordinary would hold. By afternoon, I'd be in my doorway and the cuffs would be cutting into her wrists, but that was still ahead. Right then, Oakwood Heights was quiet. A good kind of quiet. The kind that makes you think the day owes you nothing worse than a long line and a warm cup of coffee. If I'd known what was waiting, I might have said more. I might have told her to wear the uniform. I might have told her the thing she already knew, that some storms don't blow in. They rise from the ground you're standing on. She locked the door behind me and the bolt slid home with a gentle click. The phone rang just as the sun cleared the roofline. In this neighborhood, a phone call that early rarely carried good news. Amara wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. "Malcolm," she said, answering. I could hear his voice even from where I sat in the kitchen. Tight, urgent, carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too much. Amara, listened to me. They're out heavy this morning. Two cruisers parked outside my pharmacy for over an hour. They're stopping cars, especially the nice ones. Black drivers. Professionals. Folks who look like they don't belong in poverty. Amara leaned against the counter, her jaw tightening. Looking for what? Looking for nothing. Looking for an excuse, Malcolm said. Don't give them one. She stood there staring at the old mirror over the sink, the one that had a crack in the corner like a spider vein. Her reflection looked back with the same steady eyes that had faced war zones and training fields. But here in her childhood kitchen, it was different. She was deciding what armor to wear. The uniform hung just across the room, pressed and folded, ready for her next posting. If she wore it, the stripes on her chest and the eagle on her collar would make people pause, maybe even offer respect. But respect built on fear was fragile. And around here in Oakwood Heights, a uniform might just paint a bigger target on her back. Her hand brushed over the dark blue blouse folded neatly on the chair. Civilian clothes. Simple. Plain. She closed her eyes for a moment, then set the blouse aside on the bed. Today I blend in, she whispered. Not because she was ashamed of her rank, but because she knew restraint sometimes carried its own kind of power. Malcolm's voice cracked through the speaker again. Promise me, Amara, they're looking for a reason. And if they see you, they'll make one up. Please, just be careful, I hear you, she said, calm-clipped, the way she always was when the stakes were high. In the next room, Ruth called softly, her voice already weakened by the morning. Amara. Amara slipped the phone into her pocket and went to her mother's side. Ruth's hand was thin, but when she wrapped it around her daughter's fingers, the grip was iron. She looked up, eyes glassy but sharp. You're only going to the pharmacy, I know that, but you carry more than a prescription with you. You carry this family's name. You carry your father's memory. And you, Amara, are the light in this house. Don't let anyone dim it. Amara bent down, resting her forehead against her mother's. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them, breath mingling, silence heavy with meaning. I'll be back soon, Amara said. Back soon, Ruth echoed, though her eyes lingered longer than the words. I remember watching all of this from the doorway, the weight of their exchange pressing into me. There was no yelling, no dramatic gestures. Just a mother reminding her daughter that the world outside these walls was sharper, colder, and more dangerous than any battlefield she'd commanded. And a daughter trying to reassure her that a simple errand wouldn't turn into something else. But we all felt it. The quiet in the house wasn't peace. It was the pause before something breaks. Even an act as ordinary as refilling a prescription carried risk in a place where uniforms didn't guarantee protection, and skin color could make you a suspect before you spoke a word. Amara smoothed her blouse, checked the pocket for her ID, and kissed her mother's forehead. The morning sun poured through the curtains, gold and warm, but I swear it didn't touch the chill that had already settled into the room. She was just going out for medicine, that's all. But even then, we knew it wasn't going to stay that simple. I remember that morning like a film strip burned into my eyes. Amara had barely turned off our street when the cruiser slid out from behind a row of parked cars. White paint, blue stripes, lights off, but menace glowing in the grille. Briggs was behind the wheel arm, draped lazy over the window frame, the kind of posture men use when they want you to know they're hunting, not patrolling. Keller rode shotgun, hands folded on his lap, eyes darting like he couldn't decide whether to look at her car or the ground. Amara saw them before any of us did. You could tell by the way her shoulders settled, not stiff, not slouched. Just set, she adjusted her rearview mirror a hair and let her breath move in steady rhythm. In the side glass, Briggs's grin appeared, crooked, mocking, a predator who thought the chase was already over. Keller's face, though, it flickered. He looked young all of a sudden, like a man who didn't believe the story he'd been cast into. She drove like she was back on convoy duty, no wasted moves. Smooth turns, full stop, one hand ready on the wheel, the other resting light near the shifter. I could almost hear her counting under her breath the way Marines do when danger stalks close. Breathe in, count, breathe out. Each inhale a shield, each exhale a choice. The cruiser stayed with her through every block. When she slowed, they slowed. When she turned, their tires whispered after hers. It wasn't the kind of following that could be mistaken for coincidence. It was a shadow locked to her bumper, daring her to twitch. Folks on the sidewalks noticed. In Oakwood Heights, people always notice. An old man watering the patch of dirt he called a garden paused mid-pour, the hose dangling water pooling at his shoes. Two kids bouncing a ball froze their game, cut short by a soundless warning in the air. A woman with groceries clutched her bag tighter, eyes narrowing as she whispered, "They're at it again." And then from farther down, a voice carried, "Holai kiem chien nua roy." They all knew what came next. We'd seen it too many times. Amara caught every reflection. She memorized their license plate, recited it once under her breath, filed it away like evidence waiting to be used. Her gaze shifted from mirror to street to side glass in a rhythm drilled into her years ago in deserts where ambushes were routine. Only now the ambush wasn't foreign sand, it was the streets she'd biked as a girl, the cracked curbs where she'd once played tag. Briggs leaned into Keller, laughing at something only he thought was funny. His fingers tapped the steering wheel, impatient, like he couldn't wait to pounce. Keller didn't laugh. He turned his face slightly toward the passenger window, jaw tight, watching the neighborhood roll by with an unease he couldn't hide. His silence said more than words ever could. He was in it, but he wasn't at peace with it. Every red light became a test. Would they pull up beside her, lean out, bait her with words designed to provoke? Twice they did. Once Briggs revved the engine just enough to rattle the glass of her door. Another time he flicked his headlights on and off even in daylight, a signal that wasn't regulation but was clear as a dare. Each time Amara refused the invitation. She kept her car steady, her eyes forward, her breathing calm. She knew better than to give them what they wanted. From my doorway I could see the line of neighbors gathering their own kind of courage, not running, not interfering, but watching. Witnesses in plain sight. A man in a work shirt muttered to no one in particular, "She doesn't deserve this." A teenager with earbuds tugged them out and held his phone chest-high, recording before the story even began. The street itself seemed to tense, every crack in the pavement a clenched fist. What struck me most wasn't fear in Amara's face. It was calculation. She wasn't panicked, wasn't rash. She was planning, counting exits, measuring the distance between herself and the next intersection, reading every flick of Briggs's head in her mirror like it was enemy strategy. I'd seen that look once before when we were young and the neighborhood kids cornered us behind the basketball court. Even then, she hadn't fought wild. She'd fought smart. Today was no different, only the stakes were heavier. The air felt thick like the moment before thunder cracks. People held their breath without meaning to. Every block that passed stretched longer, each turn of her tires echoing with the promise that something was about to snap. You could sense it in your skin, in the way the hair on your arms lifted. A confrontation was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty waiting around the next bend. Amara kept driving, the cruiser kept following, and Oakwood Heights, caught between dread and defiance, braced itself for the storm. I was at the counter printing labels when I heard the kind of argument that makes a room tilt. It came from aisle 3, short burst, too sharp for a misunderstanding. I stepped out and saw a security guard pinning a kid's wrist against a shelf of cough drops. The boy couldn't have been more than 16, thin shoulders inside a gray hoodie, eyes blown and wet. A foil packet lay on the floor near his sneaker, like the evidence of a crime that hadn't happened. "I saw you," the guard said, voice big with borrowed authority. "Empty your pockets." The kid shook his head, lips trembling. "I didn't take nothing, sir." Amara was already moving. She'd come in quiet, a nod to me, and a quick smile toward Mrs. Donnelly in the waiting chairs. When the guard raised his voice, she turned like a magnet had found true north. It's the way she moves when something isn't right. No fuss, just direction. "Let him go," she said, not loud, but the room heard it. She stopped an arm's length away, hands open at her sides, palms visible, posture square. "You're detaining him without cause." The guard tightened his grip, the kind of extra squeeze men use when they feel a challenge. "Mind your business, ma'am." "This is my business," she said, and she wasn't talking about the pharmacy. "If you suspect theft, you call the police or produce evidence. You don't restrain a minor because you don't like how he looks." "This store's got shrink," he said, jerking his chin toward the foil packet on the floor. "And he put that there?" Amara asked. "Or did it fall when you grabbed him, the kid Marcus?" I realized a regular, always polite, always counting out change, carefully swallowed hard and lifted his empty hands. I just came for cough drops for my grandma. I could feel old anger bloom in my chest, the kind that remembers every sideways glance we grew up under. Amara's face had that same old memory in it too, but she didn't feed it. She fed the facts. Listen, she said to the guard voice. Steady, you're outside your authority. Release him now. The guard looked past her to me, maybe hoping I'd back him up. I didn't. Sir, I said we can check the cameras, and I'll call the manager. But you can't hold him. For a second, pride held the guard tighter than he held the boy. Then something in Amara's calm, maybe the certainty in it, got through. He let Marcus's wrist go. The boy pulled back and cradled his arm, blinking fast like he was trying not to cry in front of people who might use it against him. Marcus, Amara said, and the way she said his name settled the room. You okay? He nodded quick and jerky. Yes, ma'am. Go stand by the counter, she told him. I'll walk you out. The guard made a show of dusting off his hands. He shouldn't run if he's innocent. He shouldn't have to run to prove it, Amara said, and that was the end of that. At the register, I handed Marcus a small bag of drops. On the house, I said. He started to protest, then just held the bag like it had weight beyond what it was. Sometimes mercy feels heavier than shame. We stepped toward the door together, Amara, Marcus, into sunlight that had sharpened while we were inside. The bell on the frame chimed, and the street rushed back, buses and gossip, and the thin metallic whine of a bike chain that needs oil. And then the sound behind all of that, a cruiser idling, too smooth, too close. Briggs and Keller were waiting. They'd parked at an angle that said they owned more of the street than they did. Briggs leaned on the hood arms, folded grin, already in place. Keller stood by the passenger door, hands clasped in front of him like a man at a funeral who isn't sure who to look at. Afternoon, Briggs said as if it were a favor. His eyes flicked from Amara to Marcus and back, counting and judging. Ma'am, your vehicle matches the description from a reported robbery. We're going to need to ask you a few questions. Amara didn't flinch. I'll answer reasonable questions, she said. Here are my license and registration. She handed them over with 2 fingers precise. I'm picking up medicine for my mother. Briggs didn't read the card so much as brandish it, and we're going to need to take a quick look inside your car. No, Amara said. Just that. Clear as glass. Without a warrant or probable cause, I do not consent to a search. Briggs's smile thinned. Uncooperative, huh? Law-abiding, she said. Keller took the license, glanced at it, and something in his face shifted. Maybe it was the name. Maybe it was the calm. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, it's just routine. Then follow routine, Amara said. Run the plate, verify the registration, ask me where I've been. Don't skip straight to violating my rights. A small knot of neighbors had drifted closer, drawn by the humming engine and the posture of men about to overstep. Donnelly held her purse to her chest. The old man with the hose from earlier stood in the patch of wet sidewalk he'd created, watching like he was ready to testify. A teenager with a backpack I knew from the high school came up beside me and lifted his phone. I lifted mine too. If the system loves anything, it's documentation. Briggs circled the car, dragging his fingers along the paint in a way that made my teeth clench. We got a call, he said. Reported robbery sedan, like this driver matching your description. What description is that? Amara asked. A black woman, a car that isn't falling apart. Those are broad strokes, officer. Briggs stopped at the driver's door and looked over the roof at her. Don't get smart. Amara's smile didn't reach her eyes. Too late. I stepped half a pace forward at the pharmacist in me, overridden by the friend. Officer, I said to Keller, because he still seemed reachable, you can see we're cooperating. She's identified herself. You can do your checks right here. Keller's jaw worked. He nodded once, almost invisible, and moved toward the radio. Briggs shot him a look that could have carved stone. Marcus had edged behind Amara, the bag of cough drops crinkling in his fist. She shifted a fraction, so she stood between him and Briggs without making it obvious. That's the thing about her, she protects without announcing it. Where are you headed after this? Briggs asked, as if small talk could drown a power play. Home, Amara said. My mother's waiting for her medication. Must be nice, Briggs said, and the way he said it made the words ugly. Keller rattled off the plate into the radio. Static answered. The sun slid higher, heat pooling on the hood of the cruiser. I felt sweat collect between my shoulder blades and tried to breathe in a way that didn't show fear. Around us, more phones rose, the crowd widening, but not pushing the kind of pressure that changes outcomes without snapping lines. Briggs tapped the roof with 2 fingers. Decision made. Step away from the vehicle, he said. We're going to have a look. No, Amara repeated, not without cause. You don't get to rummage through my life because you feel like it. She kept her hands where they could see them. Run your checks. Ask your questions. Respect the law you say you're upholding. For a second, just a second, the street went quiet enough that I could hear the soft click of my phone's camera as it focused. And in that quiet, I saw something pass across Keller's face, a shadow of a man trying to remember why he took this job. Briggs smiled again, wider this time, the smile of someone who has decided the rules are a suggestion. We'll see about that, he said. I hit record. I swear I can still hear the scrape of Briggs's voice when he said it. Pop the trunk. No warrant, no reason, just the kind of order a man gives when he believes no one can stop him. Keller hesitated. You could see it in the way his shoulders tightened, his hand hovering near the latch but not pulling. For half a breath, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd refuse. But Briggs shot him a look sharp as a blade, and Keller moved. The trunk clicked open with a hollow sound that made my stomach drop. Amara didn't flinch. She stood, rooted hands visible, her breath even. But I knew what was back there. I'd seen her carry it in earlier that morning, a worn military duffel, the kind every Marine owns, faded by sand and sweat. Inside her sidearm, license secured by the book, and something heavier. A small black USB drive sealed in an envelope. Evidence. She'd told me quietly, almost like a confession, that it held documents tied to corruption and military supply lines. Gear skimmed, money stolen, lives put at risk. She planned to hand it to me, keep it safe until she could deliver it through proper channels. I trust you, she'd said. Briggs didn't know all that. He didn't need to. The moment he saw the duffel, his grin spread wide. He pulled it out like he'd found buried treasure. The crowd leaned forward, phone steady, recording every second. Well, well, Briggs crowed, unzipping with a flourish. The pistol gleamed dully in the light, locked in its case. The envelope slid to the ground, small and unassuming. He picked it up, waved it high like a trophy. Look here, folks. Classified material, unregistered weapon. This is what we've got. That's a lie, I shouted before I could stop myself. The weapon is licensed. The documents are official, but Briggs had already raised his voice loud enough to drown out reason. You're looking at a SPO, a traitor in your neighborhood. Gasp rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads, others whispered furiously. Marcus clutched his phone so tight his knuckles went white. Amara's face didn't move. Calm, controlled. But her silence wasn't weakness, it was discipline. She knew anything she said would be twisted before it landed. Briggs slammed the trunk shut and turned, eyes shining with triumph. Colonel, huh? That's what you want us to believe. Looks more like a thief hiding state secrets. She's a decorated officer. Malcolm's voice cracked across the street like a whip. He stepped forward, phone held high. She's a colonel in the United States Marine Corps, and you know it. Briggs wheeled on him, jaw tight. Back up or you'll join her. For a second, it looked like Malcolm might push through anyway, but Amara gave the smallest shake of her head, protecting him even now. He froze, breathing hard. Then Briggs did what he'd been angling for all along. He snapped the cuffs on her wrist tight enough we all saw her wince. The chain rattled as he yanked her forward, raising his voice so every camera caught the words. Under arrest for possession of illegal materials and obstructing justice. The crowd erupted. That's wrong. She didn't do nothing. Leave her alone, phones lifted higher. Voices tumbled over each other. An older woman near me started to cry, whispering, Lord, not her. Not her. Keller lingered behind his eyes, locked on Amara's face. He didn't grin. He didn't gloat. If anything, he looked like a man watching something he couldn't undo. Amara straightened cuffs, cutting deeper blood, already beating where metal met skin. She didn't plead. She didn't shout. She looked out at us, at her neighbors, her mother's friends, the kids who knew her name from the stories their parents told. And in that silence, she said more than words could carry. My throat burned, because in that moment it felt like I was watching not just a woman being humiliated, but an entire neighborhood's pride shoved face first into the dirt. And Briggs knew it. That's what made him smile. They didn't take the turn for the precinct. From my car half a block back, I watched Briggs flick the signal, and nosed the cruiser away from the main drag past the church lot and the deli into a strip of side streets where the asphalt breaks and the streetlights lean. No siren, no rush, just a quiet decision to leave witnesses behind. At the next stop sign, I pulled even with their rear quarter and cracked my window. Through the cruiser's open vent, I heard Keller low and tight. "Briggs, this isn't procedure." Briggs didn't whisper. "Who's gonna know?" He snorted. "We'll clean it up." My hands went slick on the wheel. I tucked in behind them again, far enough not to spook, close enough not to lose. The neighborhood thinned into loading docks and chain-link fence. A stray dog trotted the gutter nose to a torn fast food bag. Every sound felt too loud, the rattle in my glove box, the gravel pinging under my tires. I dialed 911 and left it on speaker. "They're not heading to the station," I told the operator. "Unit number? Plate." My voice shook in a way I hoped the recording wouldn't. At a four-way, the cruiser rolled to a slow halt. That's when I saw her. Amara in the backseat profile framed by glass. Cuffs in her lap, shoulders square like a steel beam. She turned her head and looked out through the rear window toward the corner where an old woman stood with a broom. The woman didn't move. She just met Amara's eyes and nodded once, the kind of nod you give your own child when you want them to know you see them. I don't know if the officer saw it. I know Amara did. I saw her chin lift the smallest degree. The lights shifted and the cruiser crept on. I followed. Inside that car, the air had to be thin. You could feel it from here, the way pressure builds before a storm. Keller's silhouette kept glancing left, then right, like his conscience was pacing. Briggs's head didn't move much at all. Predators don't fidget. I kept talking to the dispatcher, giving turns. They just passed River Avenue. They're cutting toward the warehouses. She told me to keep my distance to stay safe. I told her I'd try. For a heartbeat, the road opened on a strip of water, brown and stubborn. I saw Amar's face in the glass again, and call it knowing someone, since you were kids, call it faith. I knew what picture she was holding, steady in her mind, Ruth's inhaler on the nightstand, the pill organizer we'd filled that morning, Marcus's white-knuckle grip on a crinkled bag of cough drops, a promise she'd made to both of them to come back. Keller's voice floated again, more urgent now. "Briggs, turn around. We need to log the stop and bring her in." A fist hit plastic Briggs's palm on the dash. "Button up," he snapped. "This one doesn't walk away clean." I tasted metal. The road narrowed to a service lane, weeds licking the curb. No cameras I could see. No foot traffic. Just the dull hum of the cruiser and my own engine ticking a fraction too fast. I let the car drift another length back and flashed my lights, twice a useless little prayer in Morse. Amara didn't pound the glass. She didn't shout. She sat there breathing measured breaths the way she did under fire overseas, choosing every inhalation like a fact she could control. If fear was in her, it was outnumbered by something steadier. The lane kinked right, then opened into a cracked lot behind a shuttered warehouse. Briggs pulled in and idled. I stayed on the apron hazard lights, blinking phone still live to the operator. My mouth had gone dry. You could feel the choice gathering. It had the weight of a bad story the city has told too many times. This is where people vanish, the streets say. This is where records blur. And then from the far corner, a broom scraped concrete again. The old woman had followed on foot, stubborn as sunrise. She stopped at the edge of the lot and leaned on the handle, not waving, not yelling, just present. A second window opened in the warehouse, a face appearing, a hand lifting a phone. Briggs turned his head, just a fraction, irritated by a grit he couldn't shake. Keller spoke into the radio voice, carrying now every syllable crisp for the tape. In that thin space between two men and a bad decision, the neighborhood did the only thing it could. It watched. It witnessed. It refused to blink. And Amara, seeing them, set her shoulders like a woman who had decided she was coming home. They hauled her through the back entrance, away from the booking desk where cameras were fixed and rules still carried some weight. The corridor smelled like old paint and stale coffee, the kind of place where decisions went unrecorded. Briggs shoved the door open with his shoulder, Keller trailing behind, head low. And waiting inside was Lieutenant Ward. He wasn't a large man, but he carried himself with a kind of sharpness, like a knife edge that never dulled. His hair was close-cropped gray at the temples, eyes pale and unblinking. He didn't need to bark to fill the room. Silence did it for him. "So this is her," Ward said, voice flat, almost bored. He circled once, hands clasped behind his back, studying Amar like she was a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture he wanted. The famous Colonel Lewis, youngest black female commander to the Corps ever spat out. He let the words drip with disdain. Out there, that might mean something. In here, you're just another body in cuffs. Amar didn't flinch. She stood straight, even chained her chin, lifted just enough to remind anyone looking that she hadn't forgotten who she was. Ward's mouth curled into a humorless smile. You know what happened to my brother, Colonel Afghanistan? Roadside bomb tore the convoy apart. And you know who was in command that day? He leaned in his breast, sour with old rage. A black officer, promoted too fast, trusted too much. Weak judgment cost my brother his life. Ever since I made it my business to make sure people like you don't slip through the cracks anymore. The words weren't history. They were venom he'd been feeding himself for years. Amar's answer was measured, steady. I'm sorry for your loss, but prejudice isn't justice. Ward's smile snapped shut. His eyes hardened, 2 points of ice. Save your speeches. Out there you might get applause. In here, you'll get silence. He nodded to Briggs, who dropped the duffel on the desk with a thud. Ward rifled through it, fingers brushing over the secured pistol, the sealed envelope. He lifted the USB with mock reverence. Ah, evidence, contraband, whatever I need it to be. Malcolm's voice still echoed in my head from earlier. She's a colonel in the United States Marine Corps, but Ward wasn't hearing any of that. He had his narrative, and he was going to stitch her into it. You know how easy it is, Ward said, holding the USB between 2 fingers. A little bag of white powder. A planted print on the wrong weapon. By the time anyone digs through the paperwork, you're already disgraced, stripped, forgotten. He leaned closer, lips almost brushing her ear. The mighty Colonel Lewis reduced to another cautionary tale. For a moment, the silence in the room pressed down hard. Even Keller shifted his weight, uncomfortable. But Amar broke it with 4 words, clipped and even. I want my lawyer, that was all. Not a plea, not a protest, just a statement of rights. Ward straightened, jaw tight. Still calm, huh? We'll see how long that lasts. From outside came a muffled roar. The crowd had grown louder than before. Chants, overlapping voices rising. Let her go. We see you. The buzz of phones live streaming filled the gaps between shouts. A sound that traveled faster than sirens. Ward's eyes flicked to the window where the curtain didn't quite close. For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. He knew the crowd wasn't just noise, it was record-proof history being written in real time. Still, he turned back, voice low and venomous. Out there, they can yell all they want. In here, it's my word against yours. And trust me, Colonel, I always win. The cuffs dug into her wrists, but Amara didn't bow her head. She stood in the middle of that room, spine straight, silence sharpened into defiance. And from where I watched through the sliver of window in the hall, I realized the truth. The danger wasn't just the bruises they could leave on her body. It was the story they were trying to write in her name. A story that could erase her unless the world kept watching. And the world was watching. Phones held high, streams climbing. The walls of that precinct couldn't block it out. That was the moment I understood. If Ward had his way, Amara Lewis wouldn't just be arrested. She'd be destroyed. And unless something shifted, we were about to watch it happen in real time. They brought her into the booking area like they meant to bury the noise. Instead, it got louder. Then the glass doors slid open and a man with gray at his temples and command in his walk cut straight through the room. Chief Harper, someone whispered. He didn't raise his voice. Everyone freezes right where you are. Lieutenant Ward, place whatever you seized on this desk. Officer, unlock the evidence locker. Keller, keep your body cam rolling. His eyes swept the space, landing on Amar's wrists, then on the crowd of phones, then back to Ward. We're going to do this by the book. I stepped forward before my courage could change its mind. Chief, I'm Malcolm Reed. I filmed the stop from the beginning. I held out my phone. And I have documentation showing that drive as lawful evidence in an ongoing investigation authorization memo from Base Legal. Colonel Lewis sent me the PDF last night for safekeeping. He took the phone, scanned the clip, then the memo. Email that to me, he said. I did. He nodded once, crisp and faced Ward, opened the envelope. Slowly, Ward's mouth thinned, but he complied, peeling back the seal like it cost him blood. The small black USB sat on the blotter, ordinary as a paperclip the way truth sometimes looks, before it blows a wall out. Harper glanced at the camera feed on Keller's chest. Run the plate checks. Pull the dispatch log. I want GPS on that unit from the moment they initiated contact. He looked at Amara. Colonel, you will remain right here. Medical is on the way. She didn't speak. She stood. And then she did the thing no one in that room expected. With the cuffs biting and the chain low between her hands, Amara drew herself to full height and lifted as far as metal would allow. Her fingers aligned her elbow, snapped the clean line of a life of drill, and she delivered a salute that split the room like lightning. Silence fell. Not the awkward kind, the holy kind. Even the printer seemed to forget to hum. On the other side of the glass, the lobby swelled. Word had run down the block and then farther. Men and women in old service case and faded unit tees crowded shoulder to shoulder, some with canes, some with posture, still razor straight. One veteran Marine tattoo, long gone to blue, lifted his palm to his brow. Then another, and another. In a heartbeat, the lobby became a sea of salutes, a chorus of bodies remembering who they were. Phones caught it from 100 angles and pushed it out into a hungry world. My own screen lit like a pinball machine, comments, hearts, flashes of live in the corner. Marcus slid past me, voice shaking but steady. He raised his phone above his head. Chief, he said louder than he thought he could, I recorded everything. From outside the pharmacy, the whole thing. The country's watching. Harper took him in with a quick nod. Good. Hold on to that, son. Across town, on a sagging couch that had held up more than its share of hard days, Ruth Lewis stared at a television too bright for the small room. A neighbor had turned the volume up and set the remote on the armrest so her hands could be free. On the screen, her daughter stood cuffed and unbowed, a salute cutting through the fluorescent light. Ruth pressed a tissue to her mouth and felt something inside her loosen. Fear, pride, history, all tangled and wet. Come home, she whispered to the empty air. Come home. Back at the desk, Ward broke first. She's non-compliant, he snapped, voice pitching up. Obstructing, resisting. You see this? Harper didn't even look at him at first. He looked at the timestamps on Keller's body cam, at the route plot the clerk slid across the counter, an ugly line detouring to a warehouse no policy would defend. He looked at my video, the refusal to consent, the steady voice, the calm. He looked at the authorization memo on my phone, the base legal seal, clean as daylight. Then he looked at Ward. What I see Harper did, slow enough to make each word land, is a trunk search without probable cause, a deviation from protocol on transport, and a seizure of protected investigative material. What I see is a crowd of witnesses and an officer who thinks procedure is optional. Ward flushed a dangerous red. You gonna take her word over mine? Harper's gaze didn't waver. I'm going to take the evidence over your word. Outside, the lobby exploded in cheers at nothing more than the side of a chief who sounded like a spine. Inside, Amara lowered her salute on her own timing and met Harper's eyes. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't need to. The room breathed again, but different, like a storm had shifted direction. And for the first time since the cuffs closed, you could feel it, the ground moving under Ward and Briggs, not beneath her. I'll never forget the sound of it. Not the cuffs on Amara, but the cuffs clicking shut on someone else. Chief Harper's voice cut through the booking room like a hammer hitting steel. Cuff Lieutenant Ward. Cuff Officer Briggs. Now. For a split second, silence hung in the air, as if no one believed he meant it. Then two younger officers stepped forward, hesitated just long enough to feel the weight of the moment, and snapped the bracelets shut on their own superiors. The crowd outside erupted, cheers, shouts, fists raised in triumph. Phones trembled in hands as people tried to capture history being made right there in the same walls that had protected misconduct for years. Briggs's grin was gone, replaced by a look that couldn't decide between fury and disbelief. Ward, red-faced, spat curses about loyalty and betrayal, but nobody was listening anymore. For the first time, power was being reversed in real time. The door swung again. Commissioner Alvarez strode in a jacket, still buttoned expression, carved from stone. Reporters trailed behind him like shadows, microphones already raised. He didn't waste time. This department belongs to the people of Philadelphia. Alvarez set his voice, carrying past the cameras, past the phones, out into the streets. where chants still rolled. Those who abuse authority will face accountability. Effective immediately, Lieutenant Ward and Officer Briggs are relieved of duty and will be processed for misconduct and criminal charges. Applause shook the walls. Even some uniforms in the back clapped, tentative but real. Amara stood in the center, wrist, still bruised, posture, still perfect. She didn't smile. She didn't bask in the moment. When the commissioner turned to her, starting to say the words on behalf of the department, "We apologize," she lifted her chin and cut him off gently, firmly. "I don't need an apology," she said. "I need justice. Not for me alone, but for everyone who doesn't have cameras to prove what was done to them." It was quiet after that, not awkward, reverent. People felt the truth in her words, and truth has a way of silencing everything else. Across town, in a small living room lit by the glow of a secondhand TV, Ruth Lewis pressed both hands to her face. Tears leaked between her fingers as she whispered to no one but the memory of her late husband. "She did it. She did what you always dreamed. Our daughter stood for all of us." The neighbor at her side placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Ruth lowered her hands, eyes never leaving the screen. Her daughter chained only hours before now, standing taller than ever, her dignity intact. Ruth's voice broke into a smile. "That's my Amara." Months passed. The headlines faded, but the echo of that salute never did. When the city council convened in early spring, the chamber filled before sunrise. Veterans in uniform pieces, community members in Sunday best, kids carrying signs with Amara's name. Everyone wanted to witness what came next. Colonel Amara Lewis stepped to the podium. No cuffs this time. No need to prove who she was. She let the room quiet before she spoke. "Our community asked for more than apologies," she began. "We asked for change. Today I'm proud to announce the launch of Veterans for Justice." She outlined the plan. Retired service members, trained in protocol and accountability, would partner with neighborhoods to observe police conduct, report violations, and ensure no badge stood above the law. It wasn't a speech heavy with politics. It was practical, built from the same precision that had carried her through deployments. And it was hopeful, rooted in the idea that the same discipline that defends a country could defend its streets. The applause rose in waves, not just polite clapping, but thunder rolling against the chamber walls. At the back of the room, Marcus stood taller than he had that day at the pharmacy. He raised his hand in a salute. One by one, others followed: the veterans, the neighbors, the teenagers with phones, even mothers holding children. A wave of straight spines and lifted palms swept through the hall. Amara returned the gesture, slow and deliberate, her hand cutting the air in that same flawless salute she had given in chains. Only now she was free, and behind her stood an entire community. That's the image I carry, still, a block that once whispered in fear, now roaring in solidarity. A colonel who refused to bow, a city just beginning to change. Sometimes the strongest resistance isn't shouting or striking back. It's refusing to let your dignity be taken. And when one person stands tall, the whole community can rise with them. And that, my friends, is the heart of Colonel Amara Lewis's story, a reminder that dignity, courage, and truth can outshine even the darkest abuse of power. Her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for every voice too often silenced, and for every community that refuses to bow to injustice. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Max Stories so you'll never miss more powerful stories like this one. Your support means the world to us. It gives our team the strength and motivation to keep creating meaningful content for you. And remember, here at Mr. Max Stories, we stand tall together. That's our mark, our salute.